Hello, everybody, and welcome to Exit to Excellence, Departures in the Age of AI. My name is Garrett Rice. I'm with Callings.ai. We specialize in AI platforms for people looking for their next career. And we partner with Topher and his team at Kept. And so I'll let him introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, Garrett. So I'm Topher. I'm from Kept. I'm an attorney by education, but as I was telling participants as we prepared for this, I take a very practical approach. Like to build apps and support tools to help employers and employees navigate the employment space, especially right now with Kept. We're focused on helping folks navigate departures and exits, which is the topic of our discussion today. So happy to dive into it. I promise it won't just be a sales pitch. There will be a lot of really great things to learn and pick up about how to improve exit processes and also some of the things on how AI is impacting those. But I'm ready to get started. Garrett, you ready to go? I'll dive right in if you
Ready?
are.
Yep,
Okay,
I'm
let's
ready.
do it. Great to meet you all. As I said, we'll be focusing on exit to excellence today. So let me share my screen. Today, we're going to talk about managing departures and how AI is sort of impacting that, how we think about employee exits, how we think about even the departure in general, maybe more broadly about how it impacts our brands, our employers. Um, would love to start just by calling out like the difference between the types of exits. Voluntary versus involuntary have very different results and very different risks that come with them. I've got this, I don't know if anyone else is like using AI for the golden age of clip art, but this is like one of the things that I think it's amazing at. I throw a few things into the prompt and it spits out this lovely little graphic here. It took some liberties on it, but I think the message is clear. Termination is the door on fire. That is where the biggest risk is for employers. You know, terminations, layoffs, it's those involuntary, especially exits that can cause a lot of heartache, both for the employer as well as for the departing employees. This is where the highest liability is as well. 60% of all employment related lawsuits are for involuntary terminations. And that's not saying that 40% are voluntary terminations. I'm saying all employment lawsuits. So everything under the sun that an employer could be sued over, 60% of the time, it is directly in relation to an involuntary termination. So that's why I kind of want to call it out. There are a couple of other options for moving around a company, internal transfers, also a retirement exit that tends to be lower liability. But the layoffs, the terminations, and the resignations, that's where the biggest liabilities are. So, what I usually start with is I'll explain to folks put together a playbook. Documentation, documentation, documentation becomes extremely important when you're thinking about building your playbook for exits and for assisting employees. You want to get consistent on it. And so I tell folks think of this as three different playbooks: the voluntary, then there's the involuntary with cause, and the involuntary without cause. All of those should have a very clear path for letting folks go. What are the steps you go through? What are the resources they get access to? And how do you make them feel supported in that moment? And that's what I want to really focus on. Most of our discussion is how do we make this more supportive? And I'm going to make the case for why we should be more supportive in our departures. Headliner is it actually lowers liability. It's good for us as a company. It's good for individuals who are having to navigate it. It's good for society. If we can all figure out how to navigate departures in a more meaningful and supportive way, it's a net positive for everyone involved. So that's where we're going to spend a good deal of time talking about that. One of the reasons why this is becoming a bigger topic, AI is disrupting workforces, and we're hearing a lot of talk about it. Maybe your company's been impacted by it already. Maybe you're just looking down the road and seeing some writing on the wall and want to anticipate how it's going to impact you. But what we know is that technology adopters, so high tech companies or companies heavily involved in tech, tend to have higher turnovers. What we see is around 19% higher. We also have seen some estimates from Forbes, from World Economic Forum, a few different sources talking about the impact globally of AI on workforces. And one of those impacts is it's estimated 14% of the workforce is going to be forced to change careers entirely as a result of AI. Forbes recently had a statistic that was around 60% of workforces globally are going to experience some amount of disruption as a result of AI in the next 10 years. So maybe their role shifts, maybe their scope of that role is going to change in some way, or maybe that job's gone completely. Whatever it is, about 60% are going to experience some type of impact from the AI changes that we're seeing. 40% of employers are expected to reduce headcount in roles where AI automate tasks. So we know that this is going to cause disruption within workforces. One of the other things that I call out for folks, these statistics coming from the Office of National Statistics, SHRM, ZipRecruiter, 18 to 20 million US workers are laid off annually. So we're already seeing some impact and some uptick on those numbers right now as a result of AI. But the average is around 20% for employee turnover annually. So there's some benchmark numbers. Now that you're thinking about those numbers, maybe compare them to your company and you can start thinking about how is this potentially going to be impacting our workforces in the next 6 to 12 months. What's always surprising to me, 52% of those laid off workers are surprised. They said there were no visible warning signs. They didn't expect that layoff. I called this statistic out because if you're unexpectedly losing your job, this can very quickly become an emotional and material crisis for you and your family. And so, ways that we can sort of soften that blow and be more supportive to folks in that moment, we're going to talk through those ways without breaking the bank, ways to provide more resources without having to spend a whole lot more. But I'll also talk about some targeted ways that we can use resources to get the biggest bang for your buck in the exit journey. The biggest problem that I see when I come in and take a look at the exit journey or the exit process that employers have in place, the biggest problem is that it is so employer centric. And it's obvious, it feels like, look, we're HR teams, we're focused on liability for the company. Of course, that process is going to end up pretty employer centric. But it leaves both the departing employee as well as the HR team often feeling unsupported when they don't have something to give to those folks on the way out that can make them feel more supported and finding their next job or in understanding the resources available to them. And so what I advocate for is to start shifting that mindset of an employer-centric departure to a more supportive offboarding experience. So I'm going to talk through how can we make this more humane, efficient, and legally sound, like I said, without breaking the bank. So first things, what's legally required for the exit? You always see the HR teams focused on these ones. They're important. We need to make sure that we're checking off the right boxes. But one of the things that I see missing a lot of times, documentation. You've got to get really good at documenting as much as possible for all of this exit process. The reason is memorializing all of this information makes it easier to defend the decisions that were made and to make sure that you're consistent on how you're applying the exit process to each individual. So keep your internal documentations, but also have your distributed docs. Make sure that you have a notice memorializing the change in the relationship, a resignation letter, something along those lines. In California, we have a final paycheck law. There are some other states that have specific requirements here. Most of your modern payroll platforms are going to handle that stuff. So they'll make sure that, the final paycheck is handled properly for departing employees. I also call out, very common for employers, COBRA and state continuation requirements, making sure that people understand what they can do with their benefits, what options are available to them, how much it's going to cost, making sure those required notices get out to them. Those are all parts of the legally required pieces for offboarding. Then there's the things that most people think about: device and asset collection. We're in a distributed workforce environment. You may have a lot of hybrid or completely remote workers. Device and asset collection becomes even more important during that time. Knowledge transfer becomes important. Getting the information off of those devices, as well as getting information from departing employees, can prove to be a challenge. I always suggest, think about providing incentives for people to provide those devices faster. Think of how much money you lose by folks not turning in those devices and how much time you waste chasing those down. Maybe it's worth a $25 Amazon gift card to incentivize somebody. Hey, if you turn your device in within 3 business days, we'll send over a $25 Amazon gift card to you. The company might find that they'll save a lot of money and time by providing those types of incentives. So something small like that can actually make a difference on how you're handling this aspect of the offboarding. Make sure you communicate and then perform exit surveys and interviews. People think about this, but I'm going to talk some more about details, what you can add to those things to make them more successful. And then always remind your IT team to have a good process for revoking access. A lot of people think about the device, but they don't think, oh man, they could still log in with their username and password to their email address. If you don't shut down email properly, that could be huge liability for the company. So, why should we think about making all of those steps, this process, more human? Why invest into a more supportive offboarding? I've already hinted at some of it, but one of the things that just the biggest thing I like to call out: first impressions matter. Just like you think about how your first day on the job goes, most of the time in the legal profession, in court, we talk about first impressions, last impressions. You have the opening statement, you have the closing statement. These are the things that people remember the most. And so when you have a good final impression, you will think very differently about that employer than you may have otherwise. We know this to be true because of the rates of boomeranging employees that we are seeing today. So, first, employees like millennials, Gen Z have changed the trend on duration. Average tenure at a job is about 2.5 years these days. If you're hopping around every 2.5 years, there's a higher likelihood you're going to end up hopping back to a previous employer. So that's one piece of the puzzle. The second piece is we see a lot more emphasis on career development and supporting folks' careers. So they leave, they get experience, they become better employees, they come back better equipped to be an even better employee the second time around. We saw this trend going upwards until we hit COVID time. And then somewhere around the Great Resignation, we saw this boomerang hires drop significantly, but we are back up on the trend. So according to ADP's payroll data, 35% of employees were rehires in 2025 thus far. Pretty impressive. That's a huge number. So part of the reason why I say let's invest in the departure experience more, you may be inadvertently alienating future employees. You may be restricting your pool of future hires if you're not properly investing in the exit experience. The other reason, it actually does impact how your employees, active employees, the folks who stay, think about your company because they talk. They have friends who leave and they hear about the experience that they have. And then they're bracing themselves for a terrible exit experience. And so if you can soften that blow and make people feel supported, that also gets back to your current employee base. If people feel like, hey, they were invested in so and so when they were departing. Hey, they gave an offering of a severance to make sure that his family had health insurance figured out. That type of stuff gets back and it can impact morale and how your current employees think about the company. Lastly, craft a more human experience because you are more likely to get feedback if they feel like you're actually invested in them and care about them. And I'm telling you, feedback is a gift. And I'm going to tell you how you can take some of that information and turn it into something meaningful for the company. But before we get to how to improve that, one more push for why we should create a more human experience here. This little grid explains how the employee experience was at the company, so negative, neutral, or positive, versus how likely they are to leave feedback for the company. So, how likely are they to hop onto Glassdoor or Indeed or some other review site and leave a nasty note for you? Depends very much on, well, what was their experience? If it was negative, what we find is there's a very high likelihood that they're going to leave a review for you. Data shows over 1/3 of fired or laid off employees post negative reviews. And those are the folks who are most likely to leave a 1-star rating for your company. Millennials, Gen Z, the upcoming generations, they look at this stuff. They will review Glassdoor. They will look on Indeed. They will try to hop on Reddit and ask folks about their experience at your company. And so the more positive reviews they see, the better it's going to be. So, another reason to invest in it, if you can soften, if you can even move that negative experience to a neutral, you have a much better outcome in terms of employee reviews. And so that offboarding experience, if you can soften that blow, can make an impact that actually helps drive more hiring in the future. Second, I like to call out the employees with 6 to 9 years of tenure were the most likely to give 5-star reviews. So you should be jotting down right now, everyone who leaves with 6 to 9 years of experience, hit every single one of them up for a review because they are the most likely to leave you a 5-star review and say something great about the company, and that will carry forward. Folks who are fired gave 1 star, 40% gave 1-star reviews. Those who quit, 27% gave 1-star reviews. So your positive folks, I hear 2/3 of employee reviews are satisfied on our website. Okay, that's great. Where do you get those? You get those from current employees. You ask your current employees to leave reviews to try and push that up as high as possible. You don't incentivize them. I've seen this backfire in the past. You don't want to tell your current employees, go leave a positive review and we'll give you a $50 bonus or something like that. Because inevitably, someone writes into the review, I was paid $50 to leave this positive review, and now nobody trusts the reviews on your website. So leave it, just encourage your current employees, leave positive review. You can give them the reason. Hey, when you leave reviews for us, you attract talent to the company. You are helping craft the culture that we have here. If you want to work with great people, help us attract great people. And then when it comes time for them to leave, by offering a great human offboarding experience, you are lowering the likelihood that they are going back in there and changing their reviews to something negative. So that's why the two edges of this is encourage your current employees to leave review, make sure you have a great offboarding experience that lowers the likelihood of them changing this to negative reviews. So, how do we make this process feel more human? How do we provide them with resources? How do we make them feel like you are supporting them and care about them? The number one thing you can do is help them feel heard. And what I tell folks is this is actually a great spot to gather data as well. Take the time to meet with departing employees. If you can't, then please create automated processes for your exit surveys. But ideally, do both. Because what I notice is that people are very different in those two different environments. Face to face, they may be willing to tell you things that they're not willing to tell you in a survey, or vice versa. They might not be willing to say something to your face that they are willing to put down on a survey or in an anonymous survey. I usually encourage employers have at least one section where they can leave something anonymous. By doing both of those things, you're helping these folks feel heard and you're gathering data. But make sure you're asking open ended, non judgmental questions. I hear a lot of times, oh, but we need the 1 to 10 scale. We want the data. We want to be able to say, 50% of employees rated 10 plus on their experience. That's great. I want you to be able to do those things as well. But make sure you have open ended questions, both on the in person interview as well as in the survey, because those open ended questions are the ones that help people feel heard more. Sometimes you just ask this question in the interview and then just give them the space to talk. Let them unload. I know it can be exhausting for the HR teams as well, because emotionally, this can be taxing, having to hear bad experiences day in and day out. But it's important for them to feel heard. Give them the space to do that, and then derive what data you can out of it as well. If I hear, obviously grain of salt on some of this stuff, I hated my manager, they didn't listen, I butt heads with them all the time. Darn, okay, but at least you gave them the space to hear that. But if I hear that 3 or 4 times from people from the same team all leaving, that should be a pretty good sign it's time to dig in deeper on what's going on that team, what's happening with that manager. That's the obvious stuff. But just make sure that you're using the open ended questions to drive those conversations. The open ended ones are the ones that make people feel heard. So here's some examples of open ended questions you could use for that. So make them feel heard. And then the other big thing that you can do to humanize this process is to recognize the main concerns that folks have in this moment. And what we found is 96% plus of the time, their concerns can fall into one of these 3 categories. They have immediate financial concerns. Interesting that 2 in 5 Americans would run out of money within 1 month of losing their job. So that should scream why people have immediate financial concerns for losing a job, especially if they're falling into that big group that lost it unexpectedly. The second thing we hear is they are stressed, concerned about finding their next opportunity. Job seekers reported 44.9% probability of finding another job after losing their current one. It's the lowest we've seen in that survey in history. So folks are worried about being able to find their next position right now. And this kind of feels like a subset of number 1, because aren't they really just worried about where their next paycheck's coming from? But we actually found a distinction between number 1 and number 2, in that they're not just worried about the paycheck, they're worried about what departing your employment means for their future employment. Is this going to be a pockmark on my resume? Is there some type of career development? Am I about to make a lateral move, an upward move, or am I moving down on my career scale, in my opinion? So their concern is more about their career future in this subset 2. Think of it differently than just where's my next paycheck, which sort of falls more into subset 1 there. The third concern that we hear, and these aren't in any particular order. In fact, some people, if they have immediate health concerns, that might move up to number 1 for them. Maybe that's more important than where's my paycheck next month. But all 3 of these tend to play a role for the majority of folks. So for health insurance, we're in a unique position in the United States where if you lose your job, most Americans lose their health insurance. And so they have to suddenly face finding another job that offers health insurance, moving on to some type of safety net program. Maybe there's Medicaid or premium tax credits to subsidize their cost. I'll dive into some options there to help you understand how to navigate those. But each one of these 3 are the main concerns, represent in all likelihood the top concerns that your departing employees have. So now I'm going to talk through how we can make more resources and prepare you and your team to recognize their main concerns and provide solutions, paths for them for those 3 main concerns. So the first one on the immediate financial concerns, Help them understand unemployment benefits. This is one of the biggest questions that we get from departing employees is just very generally, they don't understand unemployment. Help them understand if they might be qualified or not. You don't want to be the ultimate person because they're probably not even going to listen to you. If you tell them, hey, you're probably not qualified for unemployment benefits, they might not take your word for that. So you can, though, prep them for, hey, unemployment benefits are available in the state. Here's the website. You can go to check it out and see if you qualify for those. You could also provide the maximum that's allowed in a state for the max duration, because that's one of the quick questions that folks have. Many people think, I'm making 100 grand, let's say a year on my salary. I'm going to continue to get in unemployment the same check that I've been expecting from my employer for the last several months. And they're shocked to learn that that's not the case, that it's actually a percentage of what you had previously been making. So helping them first understand unemployment benefits, and you can do this the easiest by just pointing them to the resources in that state. Second, a lot of people turn to their 401ks. They pull out money, they make decisions. Sometimes that's not the best decision for them. We want to encourage folks to utilize their resources in the best ways possible. But reminding them that they have those resources sometimes can provide a certain warmth and safety and sense of security that if they had to, they could go to those things to help them ride whatever transition period they need to in order to land at their next position. Obviously not ideal, but I'm just saying at the time that folks are getting let go, reminding them of resources goes a long way in calming and bringing down some emotions for folks. Bonus, if you can offer severance, this goes a long way in helping folks with those immediate financial concerns and will definitely make people feel more supported on the way out. In a little bit, I'll talk more on this one because we don't all have the resources to offer everybody months of severance. I'll talk about how you can be very targeted and use very little or a minimal amount to stretch as far as possible to support them there. So that's number one, is the immediate financial concerns. Number two, finding the next opportunity. I like to tell folks, think about what the employee needs for the next job. That's what you can provide to support them. References, letters of recommendation, providing access to it and showing them how to request those things makes it actually feel, even in the event that it was a termination, that this wasn't a resignation, this was a termination, we have to let you go, or a layoff. It can make people feel better about the fact that they're being let go if you set the stage of, look, we don't see this as a black mark on your resume. We don't think you should be afraid to reach out for references or a letter of recommendation. We want you to go find that next job. It's actually important that your individuals departing find that next job as quickly as possible for a couple of reasons. But one of the main ones is the sooner they find that job, the sooner they move on from whatever the relationship was or whatever the parting purpose was. It moves them on. Second, the faster they get that next job, if you are paying unemployment benefits to them, the faster they'll move off of those unemployment benefits. That's a huge win for the company as well. Lowering liability related to unemployment benefits. If you can help them find that next job, terrific. The bonus for this one, if you can provide outplacement resources where you actually help them connect with job boards, you actually help them with career coaching, you actually provide them the resources to get back up on their feet and have the confidence to find that next job. We're going to dive a little bit more later into both of these bonus areas, but this is just laying the foundation for what are some of the things you can do for free to make sure that people feel more supported and recognize those main concerns and start providing solutions for them. In finding the next opportunity, the case that I make for outplacement, the bonus one, which Garrett's going to dive into a little bit more, but I want to just hit on it a little bit more here. The unemployment benefits claims. Increasing your state unemployment tax costs can be huge. I mean, like 4 to 5x, depending on the state. So all of your taxes that you pay for unemployment are based on utilization. After year 2 or year 3, in existence as a company, they'll start looking at your actual unemployment benefits payout rates to determine how much you should be paying each month for every employee. So if you have high unemployment benefits rates, you're going to be paying a lot more on your regular payroll taxes. Whereas if you can create an environment where people are supported and find their next position quickly, you'll have a lot less liability for that state unemployment tax. And that saves you a lot of money on your active workforce, not just on the folks who are departing. Additionally, fighting unemployment is resource intensive. And even when you win, sometimes that just ticks employees off even more and opens the door even more for other legal battles. Now they're looking for every reason to possibly throw in an employment lawsuit at you. So it's better that they move on as quickly as possible. That's what really gets things moving and lowering liability for the company. And the bonus is it makes them feel supported. It makes you look like someone focused on creating an alumni network rather than creating a bunch of ticked off ex-employees. And that goes a long way in making people feel supported. If you look at some of the really successful law firms, accountant firms, even tech companies, they have sort of a badge of honor, pride on what happens to their employees when they leave. Some of these law firms, they'll be like, everybody who leaves here ends up in an in-house counsel job at a great tech company. Like that's the type of message that they want to send to all of their incoming employees. That's how they attract talent. And so shifting this mindset to, hey, we're focused on your career long term and we want to help you be successful actually helps you attract really great talent as well. So the last one was on that COBRA and insurance. So we talked about the immediate financial needs. We talked about their jobs, worried about the future for their careers. Health insurance is the other big one. So recognizing some of their main concerns, people hear about COBRA, but not many people really understand it. Most of the people I talk to think that it's some kind of government program that's really crappy and super expensive. Those are the themes I hear over and over again. So just as a reminder, COBRA is not insurance. COBRA is a law that says you have to allow your departing employees to continue on your same insurance plan if they choose to. The only difference is they now have to pay 100% of the price for that insurance, which is where the sticker shock comes in for most people. They think that this is super expensive insurance. I say this is the company not properly communicating how much they valued the employee while they were there. We were paying this much money every month for you and your family to stay covered on our plan. If they have sticker shock, it's because they didn't understand how much you were investing in them while they were employees. So that sticker shock is coming because now all of a sudden they're paying their portion and the employer's portion. Most employers use a third party to administer COBRA. I encourage that. Use a third party administrator. My quick plug, Kept is a COBRA administrator. We do a great job with this and we help folks navigate this in a really unique way. But use the third party administrators. That's what they're there for. They set the expectations on communications. They handle all the notices. They check off the compliance boxes here. But I would say ask some questions. Dig in with them to make sure you're getting as much as you can out of that relationship with the third party administrator. Now, there was a time that COBRA was extremely important. Back in the 80s and 90s when this passed, the insurance companies could deny pre-existing conditions. So imagine you're at a company, you have a health condition, and all of a sudden you lose your job, you're headed out. If you don't get to continue on that same health plan, the next health plan you walk into could say, that's a pre-existing condition, we're not covering that for you. And you're on your own for that health condition that you have. So COBRA was a great way for folks to continue to have access to healthcare for conditions that they had developed while they were at that workplace. So they could continue to be covered. Today, it's very different. Post ACA, they cannot exclude pre-existing conditions any longer, the insurance companies. And so it's not always the only option for them. And most of the time, I'd even say it's not the best option for them. So, what really they should be thinking about is COBRA versus what else is out there. And this is where you shouldn't be an expert. You don't need to be an expert, but I'm going to give you a few insights into the health industry that are going to better equip you to talk to departing employees about resources they can consult. And one of the main ones is every state has a marketplace. So they can go to healthcare.gov, or for example, in California, it's coveredcalifornia.com. But even if you go to healthcare.gov and enter California, they'll direct you to the right spot. So healthcare.gov is a great starting spot if you don't know a whole lot in the health space. So you can tell them you've got COBRA as an option, head to healthcare.gov to explore your other options. I'll dive a little bit more into those options, but before I go into there, I want to also call out post COVID what has changed about COBRA. During COVID, we saw the government used COBRA subsidies as a way to provide temporary relief for employees who lost access to healthcare through their jobs. This isn't something you have to worry about. They expired back in 2021. We're done with ARPA. We're done with those COBRA subsidies. You don't have to think about them. The only reason I mention them now is so that you know there's a roadmap in place for Congress to use if something occurs in the future. They've already demonstrated how they're willing to use COBRA as a stopgap measure to help people with health insurance. So, just one more reason why you should have a good administrator in there who's ready to help you in case those situations pop up again. Okay, so the things to know about insurance. COBRA, not the only option. The marketplace we talked about, healthcare.gov. There are options off exchange. That means going directly to the insurance companies as well. There's also Medicaid, which is typically for low income. It's a safety net. But a lot of times, if this person just lost their job and that was the only source of income, Medicaid may be the right solution for them. So you can tell them if your eyes are popping seeing that COBRA price, head over and see if you qualify for Medicaid. See if you qualify for premium tax subsidies on the marketplace. And then Medicare is 65 and older, and then some disabilities also qualify for Medicare. And then, of course, if they have a spouse or another job that offers health insurance, they can go hop on that plan with their spouse or at their other job. You don't want to tell them what's best for their specific needs. You could really step in it in terms of liability by not being a licensed insurance agent, providing advice to them. So instead, just make resources available. The good COBRA providers are going to make sure that they have information on the marketplace and these other options, and they provide support for it. So don't be afraid to ask your COBRA administrator what they do to provide support there. At Kept, we make sure that every departing employee has an assigned advisor who can walk them through all of those options and identify what's best for them. All right, so we've made the exit more human. You've showed you how to make people feel more heard. We've talked through financial, career, and health concerns. This is my final pitch on severance. I said I'd come back to this one. We talked a little bit about outplacement. Garrett's going to jump on that in just a second. But I wanted to final pitch on severance. A poor reputation, according to the Harvard Business Review, found that a poor reputation at a company ends up costing on average $4,723 more per hire. So your poor reputation, you could actually mitigate that negative review and that reputation by supporting folks in that offboarding moment. And I'm not saying hand everybody $4,000 cash. What I'm saying is if you invested a few $1,000s in severance the proper way, you could likely save your company money overall when it comes to hiring on the other end. To offer severance, there are a few things that you should focus on. First, I always tell folks, consult with legal counsel. You want to get a template in place for offering severance. So you consult with them just once, get this template ready to go. Maybe every 3 to 5 years, you check back in just to make sure that you're following everything. But the important things are be consistent, be clear and unambiguous, provide ample time for your departing employees to review the severance offer, and make sure that terms are clearly defined. To stretch every dollar as far as possible. Instead of just handing folks money, which if you hand them cash, they get tax withholdings on it. It's regular income. You pay payroll taxes on it. So $1,000 isn't actually $1,000. If you meant to spend $1,000, you may actually give them $600 after taxes are withheld. And then you may still have to pay a couple $100 of taxes and payroll taxes on top of that $1,000. Here's where you can really stretch every dollar. Consider making a COBRA subsidy either the big piece or at least a part of the big pitch for severance. Don't just give them cash. Pay for premiums directly for COBRA. So you say, we will pay for your COBRA coverage for 3 months, for example. Maybe it costs $600 a month. It's going to cost you $1,800 for this employee, but they get every one of those dollars because the full amount is applied to their COBRA. You don't pay taxes, the payroll taxes on it, and they don't have tax withholdings on it the way that you would if you were handing them cash. So consider making the COBRA subsidy the big thing because it's one of their three main concerns and it's one of the most tax advantaged ways to spend those dollars to move the needle on this departing employee's experience. The bonus is when their new job pops up, maybe they get a new job in month 2 and they didn't need 3 months of COBRA. Phenomenal. You just saved money. You offered them 3 months, but you only had to pay out for 2. Terrific. Great outcome. But let's say they even had to use up the full 3 months. They can now go back to the marketplace and find another plan that may be more advantageous for them than COBRA. So stretch every dollar. If you're going to do severance, make COBRA a big piece of it. You'll solve one of their main concerns and you'll be the most tax advantaged for how you're using that severance money. So 3 pillars on reducing liability: documentation, documentation, documentation. Be consistent on how you apply all of this. Have your uniform process in place. I suggest having that employment attorney review those processes and those severance agreements. Have your script ready to go and then be consistent on how you apply this. Most discrimination lawsuits come up because things weren't applied consistently. So make sure that you're being consistent and finalize everything. Get those laptops back, revoke access, don't leave it for another day, do it right now. So that's how you humanize the exit. Make them feel heard, understand and anticipate their concerns. Kept is a company that focuses on this. We've got great solutions for all of those things to take it off your plate without costing you more. That's my pitch. Feel free to reach out. Would be happy to walk through your particular situation and see if there's a good solution there for you. Garrett.
Thank you, Topher. Really great stuff. I'm wondering if I should just have you forward the slides for me, if that's okay.
Sure, sure.
Um, so I wanted to talk a little bit specifically about the departure process for employees, outplacement, and how to help them get their next role. As Topher mentioned, um, this is a major moment for most of these people, right? It's very scary for them. It's one of the top 3 or 4 things that can happen in your life. Psychologically, that can impact you right up there with divorce or death in the family. It's that impactful for the employees that are leaving. And 69% of people who are laid off report that they received no help from their former employer. And they hold on to that with a grudge. And as Topher has mentioned to you, that's a risk for your organization. The thing that is talked about less is the impact that layoffs have on your existing or remaining your remaining employees, which are the quote unquote survivors of a layoff. And 61% of them report that their motivation declines. So when their coworkers leave, it impacts the remaining employees in a big way. 71% of those survivors would begin job hunting after a layoff. In other words, they don't trust that they're not next. And so if you do nothing, the message to them is you're next. and they remember that. It reduces their productivity for you. It reduces your turnover. It increases your turnover rate for your existing employees, et cetera, et cetera. So, the gap after goodbye is a very challenging one. HR teams want to help, but oftentimes lack time or tools or budget or advanced planning on this topic. And that makes it more challenging because they even if they want to help, the message they give is inconsistent for the departing employee. And as Topher mentioned, consistency is the key. So most offboarding currently stops at paperwork, not with helping the people. And and even the companies that do, they often provide traditional outplacement. Um, and as I'm going to talk about, that has challenges as well. And that it tends to be costly and outdated. If you go to the next slide, why all of this matters is unsupported exits, as Topher's mentioned, mean bad reviews, morale hits, legal risk. But supported exits, again, support the idea of an alumni advocacy group and reputational gains. And 35% of your new hires are likely to be those returning employees. So, and that's institutional knowledge that you're retaining when they come back. It may be that you have a layoff or departure sequence because of financial situations at the company. You may not want to lose those people. So that's also a time to keep that connection with the people that may know how to run your business. So doing the right thing is good for the company. The challenge of companies that for the companies that buy traditional outplacement is this. Traditional outplacement, or the outplacement that's available for most companies today, is designed for yesterday's job market. And I'm going to talk about this in a bit. The job market has changed dramatically in the last 5 to 7 years, unrecognizably for most people. Traditional outplacement is expensive, anywhere between $1,000 and $5,000 per employee. It's one size fits all. It tends to be coaching based with static resources like articles or forms. It's short term, often only 1 to 3 months for most people. It provides minimal tech or data visibility, both for the job seeker as they depart your company and for your company to know what happens to them. Wouldn't it be nice if you were able to track and see where they landed? And often it provides nothing for the rank and file people who are impacted by a layoff. It's often kept only for those with status inside the company. And that doesn't protect you when people are writing reviews or when you're hiring people on the rank and file level. So, and then this is the most important one. It doesn't help with the workflow required for a modern job hunt. And it's in your best interest as a company to get that person their next role. So here's a glance at what a job seeker faces today in 2025. The job hunt is going to last them a minimum of 5 months on average. The more white collar they are, the longer the search is. So very senior people are seeing oftentimes a year or more where they're looking for a role. And that's with them spending 10 hours a week looking. The modern job hunt is has been subsumed by digital processes such that every job is getting a huge number of applications. So the job seeker needs to apply to at least 50 jobs and send out 50 resumes to even be considered. And this is a statistic that's 5 years old. We think this number is probably closer to 100 or more now. When they apply for a job, they're competing against 250 other applicants on average. And for the popular companies, these numbers are in thousands. So it's a lottery oftentimes for them when they're out there applying. So it's a workflow process. They can no longer apply to a few jobs, make a few phone calls, and expect to be considered. The result is that job seekers today are using 16 different tools and services. This is because they can't find one that helps them that run their whole job hunt. So they're going everywhere, desperately trying to find something that will help them. And then the final thing and the scariest thing is AI has taken over on the HR side. And so when they apply, they're no longer being considered by real human beings. They're being considered by applicant tracking systems or HR systems. And 75% of the applications that are submitted are reviewed and often rejected without a human being ever seeing those resumes. So this is just the reality of the modern job hunt. So for a job seeker, AI is now an essential part of the job hunt. It's part of their success. They need to use it because it helps them cut through the noise, figure out who they are, what their personal brand is, how they promote and articulate themselves to future opportunities. They need to figure out how to use AI to automate all the painful steps that I've just described in terms of applying for jobs, pursuing jobs. They need to empower personalization at scale because it's not enough to submit a resume anymore. Every resume has to be customized for the specific job you're applying to. And you can't do that for in enough volume to cover those 50 to 100 applications if you're not getting help. And that's where AI helps. And then it helps level the playing field. And so when I mean workflow, I mean this. And AI can help them build and manage a sales funnel, which is what the modern job hunt is. They need to find a ton of opportunities at the top, and then they need to work through the application process and network to get to a smaller number of interviews, to get a smaller number of offers. And if they don't fill the top of the funnel, the bottom part doesn't happen. And so this is the requirements for a future job hunt. And the new standard is a digital, scalable, AI driven, and human process all combined. AI enabled in the sense that it's accessible for them 24/7, 365 as they're doing their job hunt. It can't go away after a couple months because they're going to need it. It needs to combine workflow, coaching, and networking. It has to be affordable so that HR can empower them with it. And it needs to be long lasting. That is to say, they need to have access to it until they land their next role. And so this is the future of outplacement, and this is the kind of thing that you can offer your employees when they depart to help them take that next step. And this is the small plug as well. Um, Kept Careers provides all of these capabilities, and that's powered by my company Callings, which is an AI total job hunt platform. And so certainly we'd be happy to chat with you about that. So, oops, going back one slide. I'm sorry. So again, the benefits of looking at this as a way of helping people exit properly reduces your SUTA costs and unemployment duration. It strengthens your brand and alumni relationships. It helps you track outcomes and compliance metrics. And you want something that's affordable, measurable, scalable as well. Now at the end of this, over the next couple of days, we'll send you a complete departure toolkit for free as participants in this. That includes checklists, timelines for COBRA, communication templates, best practices for humane exits. And also, we can provide you with free access to Kept Careers powered by Callings.ai, so that you can provide that to anybody that's departing right now. We'll give you a month for free access to this stuff. So that'll all be included in your toolkit, and we can now answer your questions. And by the way, here's how you can link to Topher and me just by scanning that. And we'll send this deck out to you afterwards so you have this information.